To order.
We're ready.
You are? Okay, let's call the meeting to order at 6:01. May we have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Philip Goldstein,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost,
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Bard,
Here.
Commissioner Eric Westland,
Here.
Commissioner Christina Bickley,
Here.
alternate Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
alternate Tom Wood.
Here. Thank you. Commissioners, any amendments to the agenda? No. All present and accounted for, so the alternates will not vote tonight. Public comment, this is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. I suspect we'll have some comments on items on the agenda. Is there anybody signed up? You have the, no?
No one signed up
Okay.
for general public comment.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So we'll close the general public comment. The consent agenda, consists of only of the approval of the December 21st, 21 meeting minutes. Commissioners, any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I move we approve as presented.
Yes, do we have a motion to approve? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved 5-0. Business, first item, item 6A, Timnath Landing, 8th filing, final plat. Kevin.
Thank you, Chairperson. As I get the technology going. Thank you, Chairperson. As you mentioned, sorry, this is a final plat approval proposal. As I still have something to
Excuse me, by the way, in case anybody hasn't noticed, it's rather cold in here. And as you can see, the staff is adapting as well as possible here with these spacers. And that's the reason there's a problem with the heating system here. So thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
I should have
Thanks, Phil.
mentioned that at the beginning.
So as you mentioned, this is a final plat proposal for 58 single-family detached lots known as the 8th filing, located just north of Harmony Road, kind of at the northeast corner where the Harmony Road and the Great Western Railroad tracks are shown there, highlighted in the blue. That property is zoned R2 single-family residential. So as I mentioned, this is for 57 single-family detached fee simple lots with the intent to create alley-loaded single-family homes. These lots will range from roughly 3,600 square feet in size to 5,700 square feet, and that complies with the recently approved PD overlay. The density for this area will be roughly 5.1 dwelling units per acre, but this is in conformance with the overall approved sketch plan for overall density. This development, this filing specifically alone is providing 20% open space with this plat. This also will front the neighborhood / community park to the east, kind of there on the south east portion where Fellows Lane is, or Fellows Avenue. To the east there is a future neighborhood community park. So there's ample open space that this filing will have amenities to. This will also connect with the rest of the Timnath Landing 3rd and 4th filing, their trails and open space as well. Owner is CAC Timnath LLC. Applicant is PCS Group, represented tonight by Mr. Jeff Norberg, who is actually joining us via Zoom, and I'm sure he will have a quick presentation after I am finished. Staff has reviewed this against the preliminary plat, and it is in conformance with the approved preliminary plat and the rest of the land use code. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff for a brief presentation. Jeff, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Kevin. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Go ahead and share my screen. Good evening, everyone. First off, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time this evening to hear about this final plat proposal. As Kevin mentioned, my name is Jeff Norberg with PCS Group. We are the land planners and landscape architects for the Timnath Lakes community. This is a pretty simple application this evening, so I'll keep our presentation brief.
Hey, Jeff, have you shared screen yet?
I have. Are you not seeing it?
We are not.
Ah, here we
There we go.
go.
Now it's coming up.
Apologies. Let's
There you go.
Get back.
Now we got it.
let's get back on track here. So I'd like to take just a quick minute to acknowledge the team and to thank Kevin as well as all the reviewers that helped us get here this evening. This slide depicts the existing sketch plan for the Timnath Lakes community to give everyone a context for this application. The blue dashed line is highlighting the filing 8 final plat area. Here is a page from the approved PD overlay amendment showing the approved alley load use for this specific area of the community. And finally, a page of the approved preliminary plat 3. And again, we've highlighted the filing 8 area on the exhibit for reference. Here is an illustrative version of the final plat drawing. As Kevin mentioned, this proposal is for 57 single-family detached alley-loaded fee simple lots ranging in size from about 3,600 square feet to 5,700 square feet, which again is consistent with both the approved PD overlay amendment as well as the third preliminary plat. So wrapping up, the proposal is consistent with both the sketch plan, PD overlay amendment, and third preliminary plat. The proposal's been reviewed thoroughly by town staff and referral agencies, and staff has recommended approval. So I'd like to thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there public comment on this? Do we have anybody
Yeah.
signed up to speak on this?
No,
Okay,
we do not.
so we'll close the public comment, bring it up here. Commissioners, questions for Jeff?
I have a question. The alleyway between Quentin and Fellows Avenue appears to be narrow and there's several turns. Is that going to be accessible by garbage trucks and fire and safety?
That alley has been reviewed by PFA and it is allowable by them for their standards for width for access.
It looks probably right close to the edge. So if there's any consideration for making that corners rounded to make it easier.
Yeah, PFA, for emergency, they necessarily wouldn't use the alley anyway. They go to the front doors from that standpoint, but that alley would still meet their requirements for turning radius and accessibility.
Thank you. No other
Commissioners?
questions?
No, thanks, Tom. Other questions, comments, commissioners? Staff, anything else? Marty? No. Eric, did you have? Okay. Anybody else? I do have one question. Early on, this was called Timnath Landings, and at some point I thought it was changing to Timnath Lakes. Is that, but I see the monument that you had up there a moment ago. Is it still Timnath Landings or is it in fact Timnath Lakes?
Timnath Landings is the platting name of it. The neighborhood branding name is now Timnath Lakes.
Okay. All right. Anything else, commissioners? Okay. Do I have a motion on business item 6A, Timnath Landing, 8th filing, final plat?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thanks, Jeff. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Item 6B, Land Use Code Amendment number 11. Kevin?
Thank you, Chairperson. So with this amendment, we're going to actually kind of break this up into two different portions. I'm going to kind of give an overall summary of the amendments that were in your packet, and then I'm going to kind of separate one of them out that you have all received some public comments on, just to have further discussion on, so we can kind of separate them to have discussion on any of the other items that you guys might feel you want to, and then we can kind of then touch on that last item, which is the daycare use. So this is a proposal to amend multiple sections of the land use code. Basically, we are looking to modify items that are for administration, use regulations, development standards, annexation procedures. That also then affects notice requirements, the daycare center locations, retail fuel location parameters, permitted uses within the Harmony corridor zone overlay, land use regulations, and then other uses and definitions for manufacturing, selling of alcoholic beverages, allowable building materials, minor subdivision review criteria, parking reduction setback, landscaping for initial acceptance of subdivisions, state residential zoning standards, deck setback requirements, front yard setback requirements for porches and patios, and then added conditions for permitted uses and pre-application requirements for annexations. So that's generally what we have provided within this land use code amendment. There are specifics to those. We as staff would be happy to go through those. Like I had mentioned, we're going to kind of separate the two items out since you received quite a few public comments on the daycare use. We kind of feel we can touch on that one last so we can have a further discussion, but we want to open it up to you all if you have any questions on any of the other proposed amendments that are not of the daycare and the Harmony corridor.
Okay, first of all, do we have any, and I do appreciate us bringing it up, is there anybody signed up for public comment on anything other than the daycare?
We do have Mr.
Okay.
Barkley, who I believe wants to talk on two. One of them is the daycare facility as well.
Okay, help me with this, Kevin, with staff. Should we hear public comment on anything not daycare related first, or should we bring it up here first? That's not our normal protocol, but it's
we can have discussion and then do public comment as one, and then kind of do public comment after the end of that, or we can have discussion on. It's kind of up to you on how you would like to do it, but
Okay.
we can have our discussion back and forth as staff, because public comment, there's no engagement for conversation. So that's kind of up to you, chairperson, on how you like to do it. But I think from our perspective, we would prefer to, just like any other application, have presentation, discussion, and then public comment.
Okay, I think I would prefer that as well. So I'm going to bring it up here first and ask commissioners to ask staff questions on all items not daycare related. And then I think that was a good idea to separate that out because we obviously have a lot of interest. So commissioners, Marty, you want to go first?
Yep.
Any questions you have on those items?
Yeah, I have a list. So going in order, the Article 4, the rebuilding of residence, was that one just simply to protect somebody that is in one of those zones that has to rebuild their home?
Yeah, so the actual history on that, and I believe you were around for it, Marty, was we brought a land use code amendment back in about 2017, I believe, for changes to residential within the business zoning district, which is mainly Old Town. At that time, Planning Commission made a recommendation that the only way for new residential single-family homes in the business district was if it were a rebuild, not just brand new. That condition kind of slipped through the cracks when it went to town council, and we just recently was made aware of that. So we're just kind of bringing it forward to then rememorialize that condition, but that was actually a condition from Planning Commission quite a few years ago.
Okay, thanks. And then this one kind of deals with a lot of these. Is the definition of abut, is it just directly adjoining, or what is, for the purposes of quite a few of these, what is abutting residence?
Typically, the definition is if it is directly abutting, adjoining that lot line is how that is done.
The way staff interprets that is it's a shared lot line.
Yep.
But so if you're sharing the lot line with that use, it's abutting.
So across the street.
Across the street is
or
not
alley is
abutting.
not. Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you. And then 4.4.13, there's one piece in there is, so did I read it correctly that on these breweries and things, there's no speakers outside at all allowed?
413 is the dwelling for business zoning district.
Sorry, this was the one on, I have it mislabeled. What's that?
Oh, 4419.
13. Yeah. Mhm. I may have mislabeled it, but I thought it was 13. But in any case, it says no.
Oh, that
music,
one,
no
yep.
Speakers, nothing. Is that as it's written that there's not even a single speaker outside that they're allowed?
So that's the way this is being proposed on that. That wouldn't have any impact on existing uses such as beer works because they already have a conditional use in place. But yes, that is what that is intending is that outdoor noise, with speakers, even if it is a singular speaker would not be prohibited or would not be allowed. Yep.
So that they're more restrictive than the residents that they abut. Right?
In a sense, yes.
Okay. All right, and then.
Excuse me, to elaborate on his, because it was going to be is this only where they abut residential or is this anywhere?
That would just be anywhere.
That's anywhere.
Yep.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
take it.
That was a good clarification.
Yeah, and I'll take it.
And then the other one on health clubs. What was the justification for that? I think it was 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I just don't understand that.
And that is only when it is abutting a residentially zoned lot. So when you are sharing that lot line with a residence, it's you could have some situations where you have a 24-hour fitness or something where a health club is opened that late in the night. So it's to reduce on the amount of light car traffic noise when you are abutting that residentially zoned lot. So if it's not abutting a residentially zoned lot, like a 24-hour fitness could do their normal hours of operation. But since that was the thought behind the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Was just to cut down on some of that nuisance to that adjoining residence.
Okay. And then 4.4.32, the fuel stations. And
Yep.
that was just a clarification because it was kind of worded. It was all English, but arranged in a way I didn't understand.
Yep.
But is that saying the fuel stations can't be can't be closer than a quarter mile?
Correct. That is what we are proposing, is to prohibit retail fuel stations from being closer than a quarter mile from each other. That way, there's just not a overrun. Like if you kind of see over in Fort Collins at times, 3 corners of an intersection has gas stations. The intent of this is to separate them out a little bit further.
Okay. I think that was it.
Commissioners, staff, correct me if I'm wrong. Even though we're going to vote on all these amendments together, if somebody, as an example, if Marty or anybody says, I'd like to suggest that speakers outside a business be allowed, we can add that condition. These will all go to council. After that, council can accept that recommendation as an amendment to these other changes in the land use code, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I was just using that as an example, but keep that in mind as we go along, and then we'll circle back to all this. Tom, you obviously have.
Yeah, I've got a question on page 41, item 5.3, metal surfaces. As I read the way this is written, it would exclude from residential use metal surfaces. Would that include metal roofing? How about solar panels that may be made out of glass and metal?
So it would be metal roofing. It would not prohibit solar panels. It's mainly that primary metal material within that. So the land use code right now actually had a gap in it to where the RE, R1, R2 actually didn't have a designation if the metal surfaces would be allowed or not. So that we're just kind of bringing that into defined definition for that. But yes, it would prohibit metal roofing in the RE, R1 and R2, but it would not prohibit the solar panels.
Is there a rationale for the metal roofing? I know stone-coated metal shingles are currently being considered in some places. Is there any rationale for that?
Is the stone, the stone is the exposed material. It's not the metal exposed
So they
material.
just want to avoid the plain metal roofing?
Right.
Is there an aesthetic reason or what's the
Yeah, to
reason?
fit in with the rest of the residential that's in the area.
So you want only composition type
you could do tile roof, you could do composition style, you could do
stone-coated metal roofing? would be
stone
allowed,
coated
But just not the big sheets and panels?
of corrugated metal, or
How about like on a back deck or a roof?
as long as it's not the primary, the way it's written is the primary surface material. So if you have accent, that's
So
totally
if they
fine.
put a shed in the back, you could have a metal roof?
Accessory buildings are handled, I think differently, aren't
They
they?
are handled differently.
Accessory buildings have a different standard that,
Or
that
a
doesn't
roof
fall under.
over a back porch or a deck could be?
A roof over a porch would be fine, yep.
Metal awnings would be allowed over
Yep.
windows,
That'd be fine.
but just not the main roof?
The primary roof
Okay,
surface.
just
yep.
want to make sure that that was clear because I'm sure that that's going to be a point of discussion. Thank you.
And we can, like you said, I mean, if you,
It might help to.
if
to
you
make-
wanted to add some
to make that,
clarification.
Wording a little bit more specific in terms of it's only pertaining to the main roof of the house.
I'm assuming cement shingles would be okay, right? 'Cause
Mhm.
the ones that are slight looking.
Yeah, I can see trying to avoid corrugated steel or, something that just doesn't look nice.
Mhm.
But I can see for other awnings or sheds
Yep.
or porches or decks that might be something to look at.
Tom makes a good point. Is this something, can this be clarified? If he noticed it and doesn't see it as being entirely clear, I would guess that it's probably not entirely clear. So it would seem that it's warranted to,
Right. If
clarify
I was
that.
an engineer or an architect, I'd want that specification a little bit tighter. Wouldn't you, Don?
okay, good. Lisa agrees it's not specific staff. Is that, may we, did I see?
So
at
there's
least a-
there's another section in the code. I'm going to read it to you just so you hear the actual narrative. This is a table that just helps to clarify some things. Metal roofing, standing seam or corrugated metal roofing shall be allowed only for feature elements defining the massing of the project and appropriate for the pitch and application as defined elsewhere. Metal roofing shall be non-reflective and shall relate to color palette of the primary and secondary materials. And I think that was in the, is that the?
I wouldn't even say that's clear as mud. I would say that's entirely unclear. Is it out of the question to have it, I like something pretty simple. Is it out of the question to have an example in there? Would that, Tom,
Yeah.
would you think this would be a case where you?
I know
would-
that in your permitting guides, for decks and porches, you do have examples and pictures and so forth. That would be something to consider maybe.
Just as a point of clarification to my point of clarification earlier, do we just need a head nod, or will we have to, when we vote on this, will we have to reference specifically whichever number that is, circle back so that,
You would need to reference this specific section.
okay. You'll keep track of that if you would, please, and we won't let this one.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it would help.
Good catch. Tom, any others?
That's the only one I've got.
Okay.
I can see how an architect might quibble with, gosh, a metal roof might be better, but I'll let it go.
Okay, Robert.
I do have a question on section 5.2 dimensional standards, specifically table 5.1. This pertains to the estate residential classification.
Yep.
I understand that the recommendation is to reduce the minimum lot area from 1 acre down to 0.5 acres.
Correct.
But I see that no adjustment has been made to the maximum density.
Correct.
Is-
So,
Should, and I'm a simple guy, but why don't those move?
so one of
Move
those would have to
together.
move to the other. So you can't technically get a 1 acre minimum lot and then get a maximum density of 1 unit per acre. That's just not physically possible because when you take out 20% for open space and then roughly 15% for roads, there's just no physical way to actually get a 1 unit lot minimum and then get 1 unit per acre. So if by reducing the lot area to half an acre, you can then get that threshold to have a minimum lot size of a half acre within on a 40-acre parcel. You can then get 40 lots within that overall parcel at a half acre in size with the other open space, roads and things like that.
So let me, if we have 40 acres and before the maximum we could have on that 40 acres was 40 lots, somewhat less than that, given roadway and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
If we are now reducing that to a half acre per lot, are we still not over that entire area restricting ourselves to 40 total lots?
We still are restricting it to 40 total lots. Correct. And that's what the 1 unit per acre is still going to cap is the 40 lots within that area.
I guess I'm not understanding the benefit of allowing smaller lots, but not allowing more people to live in that area.
So at that point, we would then, because the intent of this with the estate residential zoning, it's more of a rural area, not necessarily in town. So if we're going smaller lots anyway, then we would most likely be looking at a different zoning, which would be the R2, to where then folks could be getting higher density up to that 4 units per acre in the R2 to get a little bit higher density. So what the intent of this is to keep that 1 unit per acre max density, to keep that more rural, larger estate feel, but just allow it to then have the allowance of 1 unit per acre to get that, total, let's say on that 40 acres to get the 40 lots.
Can I just clarify another way?
Please.
If you had 100-acre parcel, right, and you had 20 acres of that, 20% for open space, 15 acres for your roads, you'd be left with 65 acres. So you could only physically put 65 lots on that 100 acres. In this scenario, you'd be able to fit 100 half-acre lots or slightly larger than that in those 65 acres and still be at the overall density of 1 dwelling unit per acre.
Okay.
Yep.
You don't appear convinced.
For me, it just feels like if we're moving one, the other one should also adjust as
It-
well.
That was when we were looking at it that way, we were kind of thinking the same, but with the intent of keeping it just at a max 1 unit per acre, the way to do it was just by reducing the lot size to half acre. They can still obviously go larger than half acre in size. You could get 3/4 of an acre in lot, depending on what they wanted, whatever the developer would want to do. But the only way to really get them to have the ability of 1 unit per acre was that the lot size would have to go down. Because as, per what Brian said, on 100 acres, you really capped at 65 with an acre minimum lot size. So you'd never actually be able to reach the acre density that's allowable.
Right. Okay. And I guess it makes sense if not every lot is, building out to the minimum, the half acre.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody came in and wanted to do that, I guess somewhere there has to be a gap if 20% is open space and 15% is roads. So somewhere we have to fill the rest of that. Do we get the benefit of extra open space?
There could be extra open space, or the lot sizes could increase from the half acre up to like I mentioned, the 3/4 of an acre, something like that.
Okay.
Commissioners, all of whom here are a lot smarter than I am. Tom, in particular, I thought something there resonated with you. And anybody else see where Robert's going with this and want to offer any thoughts on this particular? I'm just trying to keep a list here. If there's anything that, like the metal roofs, that ends up we're needing tweaking a little bit. Anybody else on this particular item? And Robert, you can come back to you. I just wanted to see I thought Tom was about to chime
No,
in.
no, I understand what he's asking. I'm pretty open in terms of, do we need to make that change or not?
Meaning you don't think it's,
I'm not sure where staff is going with that particular change. Is there a reason you want to?
It's to allow developments to actually reach the 1 unit per acre density. Because as it sits now, any development would not be able to actually have acre minimum lot size and meet a density of 1 unit per acre.
I see. Is it realistic to assume that people want to do that?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And like Robert had mentioned, it still would cap at 1 unit per acre. So the benefit would then also potentially be additional open space or larger lot sizes that then kind of give the more rural feel to it.
Sure. Certainly lower density in some of the northern areas of Tinmouth makes sense.
Correct.
And this actually allows for maybe some clustering development type of thing down to that half acre lot. So somebody may not want to do full 1 acre lots because that's a pretty substantial size lot with irrigation requirements and other things that may be prohibited. They may want to do a half acre lot, leave a bulk of the property actually as open space. So it gives some flexibility in that clustering, so to speak, idea. And again, a 1 unit per acre density is a pretty common thing as far as a density for more rural areas. And so that's kind of why we wanted to hold true to that 1 unit per acre density. But we felt like we were getting hamstrung between 2 conflicting points where people couldn't actually meet both of those requirements. And so it was just like the 2 run counter to one another. So we felt like shifting the 1 actually helped us because it gave us this clustering ability in pushing smaller lot sizes, but preserving more of an open space in a larger development. That was
Lisa-
that was the rationale behind it.
excuse me, Lisa, I thought maybe you had thoughts on this
No,
one.
after the, I mean, I had questions on this as well, but after the explanation, I understand that's, yeah, you're allowing for that and it makes perfect sense as far as I'm concerned.
So Robert, back to you. Are you more comfortable with this or you still have something?
I believe I understand, but maybe you can help me understand the R2 designation and what it is that the residential estate will still allow that is not otherwise achievable under R2.
So R2 minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet lot minimum, 4 units per acre. So somebody in that could still do larger development within that. But the R2 zoning, as Tom had mentioned, is more central to Timnath, not kind of on the outskirts, northern part of Timnath, to where we wouldn't want the ability for somebody to do 4 units per acre. So this, with the RE and this, it gives somebody the flexibility to, like Matt had mentioned, to do maybe a cluster development or the little bit of a larger estate development, kind of on the more outskirts of Timnath where it is more appropriate instead of the R2, which is going to be more central to, where we're at now, central to Harmony Road, things like that.
Appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Okay, so okay, good, thanks. Let's see, other questions on the individual items? Christie, anything? No? It's hard to be in this cold. It's hard to. Lisa has a list. Go ahead.
Not a very
Go
long
at it.
one. Just going through them. Let's see. Most of them on Article 4 with the liquor drive-through, is that designation or those hours of operations standard with other establishments like us in locations? Is that fairly standard?
The conditions of liquor store abutting the hours of operations.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that kind of standard across, kind of the same thing with what Marty was asking. Just to, we've seen that there are liquor stores that can be open until midnight. So when it's abutting a residentially zoned lot, to kind of reduce that impact of, cars, headlights, noise, past a certain hour of time. That was the reasoning behind that.
Okay.
Were you asking in the area if that's standard or is that?
Just within the town and within what other limits that.
Yeah,
Timnath
so
has set up.
Same
liquor store right now isn't actually a defined use.
Right.
So that's why we're adding it in there and then adding that condition so we can kind of capture that from that standpoint. So it's not standard in town, but that condition is pretty standard across a lot of uses within town.
Okay. On the one about the fuel stations, so quarter mile, not just on the same street, but that includes across the street, across the corner, quarter mile in any direction.
Correct.
Okay.
And we were using the property line in this case. So from the example earlier, when we said abutting, that means the shared lot line. In this case, it could be lots apart even. So there could be lots in between it, as long as that one lot line and the other lot line, the two closest lot lines are a quarter mile apart.
So it's not like from the center of that
Correct.
property to the center of that property.
It's
from
using the edge of the
closest.
lot and going out a quarter mile from there.
Okay. And is that similar to, I mean, like I said, there's none in existence right now, so we're setting some standards.
Correct.
Is there many locations where they're further than that, or is that a
Yeah, Fort
nice-
Collins is actually further. It's, I think, a half mile. I think it's a
Yeah.
half mile.
So
But we have a pretty short distance. We've got really
2
2
miles.
miles from, I guess,
Main
Main
Street
Street
to
to Latham. So we're really talking about that space. So if we did half mile, it could limit it pretty restrictively to a point where there'd be only potentially 1 or 2 in that, which may be okay. But we thought the quarter mile was probably a place to start and use that as at least not getting gas stations on every corner of every intersection.
now, is this just for the Harmony corridor, or is it, so I mean, looking long-term down the
I
road?
think it's all, I don't think it's exclusive to Harmony Corridor. I can't remember.
No, that would be a new condition so it would also apply to CC, RC, and then the Harmony corridor.
Okay. Because looking long-term down the road, particularly as you're looking down up into Prospect and the high school and some of those things, I mean, a quarter mile is not that far.
Right.
And particularly, the frame of reference of a half mile in Fort Collins is just a nice visual. It's like, okay, that's not bad, but a quarter mile can get, granted, there's only 2 miles here between Latham and I understand that, but, do we need 5 gas stations on Harmony? Do we need 3 when we've already got 2 right on the freeway? I'm just not convinced that a quarter mile is enough.
We'd be open to more if that's something that you're.
Commissioners, does this resonate with you too? Lisa makes a good point. Is this something that we want to consider? Anybody else have some thoughts on that same issue?
I would agree. I think what Fort Collins has is probably better. And you can always get gas on the other side of the highway.
Right. And then I'm looking, like I said, long-term by the time because if we take this stance now, it's hard to undo it. It's a lot easier to do it right the first time.
Is a filling station defined, pardon me, if a grocery store has fuel, does that become a gas station? So currently Costco and Wright are in violation of this and they're grandfathered in, obviously.
No, so
But you wouldn't have that
Costco
scenario
and
again?
Murphy are not in the Harmony corridor. So they would be grandfathered actually into it. I take that back. They are both, they would be in the zoning districts, but they would be grandfathered into it to where, yes, they would be in conflict with each other, but since they're already established uses and approved, they would be grandfathered from that standpoint.
But in the future, if you had a grocery store with fuel on one side of Harmony, somebody want to put a gas station on the other side, they'd have to adhere to this quarter mile
Correct.
setback. Okay.
For everybody's
think
benefit, the
extending-
Harmony corridor is defined for the purposes of this, defined as what? And Marty had a question, and I think Lisa asked the same thing. Does this apply to other commercial
This
corridors?
does apply to other commercial. Yep. So even though Costco and Murphy, they both would fall under this if they were brand new, since they are already existing, they're grandfathered into being the allowed uses. But anything new, let's just say to the south in the Ladera, would have to abide by this requirement to the Costco gas station.
Is that clear? And
It's clear.
circling back
It's
to
just
this
a matter
issue
of
of-
where's the.
Yes,
number.
the question at hand now that Lisa's brought up is, do we stick to a quarter mile or do we increase it to a half mile?
But that's the issue I have. If you look to the future, it's not just Harmony Quarter, like you just said. You know, what if this is
It's Ladera. it's everything.
Mulberry,
Mhm.
you know? And ones like this, that's why I would hesitate to get too prescriptive, you know, because we're talking about the whole GMA, really. I mean, eventually.
And this is something that, can be changed in the future as well, depending on what you all feel tonight. And we get future applications in and then we see an issue, but we're just trying to kind of head off what we've seen over in Fort Collins and some others to where 3 corners of a intersection have gas stations instead of other, commercial retail.
Well, and you also say on here, it will create more opportunities for other users. What does that mean?
So if there's, like I just mentioned, if there's not a gas station on 2 of the corners, there could be a restaurant, there could be a dry cleaner, there could be, a coffee shop, there could be something other than an actual,
Gotcha.
gas station at that corner. Because as we all see, gas stations like to be on those prominent intersections of roads just because they can try and capture any of the users that drive by.
So I think we're on the metal roof issue. I think we'll be able to craft something now, but I think we ought to try and craft whatever, if we're going to suggest an amendment to this one, I think we ought to craft what that'll be so that we circle back to this at the end before we vote. Tom, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah,
on-
I've been reading through it. The way it's worded right now, it says, no metal surfaces or flat face cement blocks shall be visible.
I'm sorry, wait, I wasn't talking about the roof, because I think we got that one.
Yeah.
We'll nail that one down because we were pretty far along. I'm trying to stick to this one for the
Sure,
moment.
sure, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
I
we'll
think it's
hold
fairly
that
simple.
thought,
It's just a
because
matter of whether
that
we
probably
think,
sounds like- So.
do we think a quarter of a mile is acceptable or do we want to go more? I mean, that's what you think it's okay?
I think
I
with the
don't.
structure of Harmony with medians, intersections, those businesses are going to be driven to the corners and not midway through. So they're going to drive themselves to the intersections anyway, which are already going to be spaced out a half a mile, more or less. So
But this
I
one-
don't see any need to.
This rule does not just talk about Harmony. It applies to everything within our city limits.
But I also think as the town grows and major thoroughfares are established, you'll see a similar arrangement. I would assume that Harmony brings. I'm not in favor of extending it more than a quarter mile myself. That's just my opinion though.
Robert, do you have thoughts on this one?
I do. Tom mentioned something that kind of struck with me. He made the comment that they can just go to the other side of the interstate for gas. And that got me thinking that, yeah, but we want those tax dollars. I understand the reasons not to have 4 gas stations on 4 corners. Aesthetically, it's not pleasant. Traffic, it can have problems. I understand the need for diversity. But do you have any idea how the tax base on a gas station compares to other comparable uses that might go in that area?
We have not looked into that fully, but we can take a look at it.
I also think that the least amount of trips we all have to make across I-25 benefits us as residents. So that's my opinion on it. That the more that's at home, the better for us.
I'm certainly sympathetic and like to see the tax dollars, but some things may not be worth it.
So I'm happy to just keep asking my questions and then, because we're not going to get to
Well, I want
agreement on this.
I want to stick with this one for a minute and see if we have sentiment when we get to the end here. Do we have sentiment to add a condition or amend this from a quarter mile? If that's the only issue about this particular item, do we have a majority of sentiment here that we want to go? I
would like it to be more, but you know, it would come down to what the preference and what the vote is. I mean, I would like it to be more. Is there a happy medium and go a third of a mile? But that's my opinion. I think it should be more.
You,
Considering the long range, huge, the growth management plan and everything we're looking down the road as far as everything, not just the Harmony Corridor.
So can I interject for
yeah,
a second?
please, because then I'll come
So
back to it.
I think what we could do is we have an interest in actually expanding it, and we have some folks that are not on board with that. Why don't we set that to the side for the moment, and then when you make your motion, Lisa, you can make a motion considering that, and then have everybody vote on that motion. And if that motion fails or passes, we can include it in as a condition of the approval.
Okay, let me clarify a little bit further. Something Lisa said resonated certainly with me, and that is try and get it right the first time. Now, I'm going to balance that against the opportunity to change it in the future. And I don't want one to be at odds with the other. And certainly we've had pros and cons of change. Plans can change. Certainly, and we've been applauded and criticized in some cases for changing zoning on occasion for certain things. But my question is there a way to reasonably get this right, Lisa, that you would see now? I'm not getting strong sentiment that the rest of the commission wants to amend it to a half a mile.
One thing you could do, Phil,
Please.
as Matt mentioned at the recommendation, is that recommendation that staff goes back and looks at this further and then brings back this at a future time. That is another option that is out there.
Oh, good. Well, that sounds like the wisdom of Solomon. Tom's nodding his head too. Everybody, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd like to know, comparable communities surrounding what are we?
Can I make one clarification? I just want to correct something I said earlier. Fort Collins is actually in their neighborhood commercial districts. They're actually 3/4 of a mile between the property lines on that, not half a mile. So they're a little bit more.
In residential areas?
In their, like in the neighborhood commercial district, the other commercial districts that allow gas stations. So they don't allow gas stations in residential districts, and neither does Timnath.
Okay, so would we be actually be pulling that one out with the understanding staff will come back? I mean, this is, I assume we not only we have the liberty of that, but this is not terribly time sensitive that we couldn't.
Well, that
cover
would
this
be
next
a
meeting.
recommendation, and as you've mentioned before, council can either take that recommendation or say the quarter mile works. But that could be a recommendation condition that, this item or that item specifically gets, pulled to then have staff do further research. And then,
Okay.
council can then take that into consideration.
Okay, Lisa, would that
Sure.
sound like a good compromise?
You bet.
All right, go ahead with the rest of your list. Thank you all.
Phil, just real quick on
Yeah.
that. I agree with your point that we don't want to stall progress here. I'm wondering if we can somehow communicate. What I'm hearing is that there is support for at least a quarter mile and a desire to look at the impact of possibly expanding beyond that. But if it is in fact the opinion of all voting members that we're at least supportive of the quarter mile, express that.
Okay, so I want to make sure, I thought we had, what Kevin was suggesting seemed like what we were essentially doing is making a recommendation to council, and everything we do for the most part, other than a couple of specific things strictly within our purview or recommendations, that would go forward to council. And you're suggesting that the recommendation would be at least that, but allow staff to investigate further and come back through us, then back to council on this specific item. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
At least
to
so that it's no less than that.
Exactly.
We're
And
in-
also and again, I'm assuming this is the other council members' desire, but to make sure that is clear, that we at least support at least a quarter of a mile.
Again, I'll look to Lisa. It seems like, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Seems like we're-
Is there not currently a regulation regarding distance? So I
Correct.
echo Robert's point. I think that's a really great way to word
Okay.
that I
Yeah,
think we're all in support of a minimum of
okay.
a quarter mile. potentially more based on any research that you guys may do or information provided. And
All right.
I think that's a fair
Good,
recommendation.
Robert. I
Yeah,
agree.
That's a great
Okay,
point, Robert.
all right. Back to you.
I believe that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Christie, did you have? Okay. Good, thanks. Commissioners, anybody else on any of these individual items? We're still separate from the daycare issue. Nobody? Okay. All right, staff. I would, at this point, unless you feel otherwise, I would have you do the introduction of the daycare issue. Okay. We will probably, I'll look to the rest of the commissioners. We may want to go through the same thing, have some questions from up here first, then open up to public comment. I notice that's backwards from what we usually do, but this is a little bit different circumstance. But let's first get the introduction of the item out of the way, please. And we will, when we get to public comment, I know you mentioned somebody wanted to speak on something on the previous list and on that, and we'll kick off the public comment with that so that both are fresh in our mind. Okay.
Thanks, Chairperson. And actually, I mean, the protocol for land use code amendments and things like this, which are give you a little more latitude in how you handle your proceedings. So it's not the same as a development proposal. So you do have a little more free reign in how you approach these. So we can have as much dialogue as you like, open it to public comment. The form of how you want to handle it is totally at your discretion. So as long as we have that public comment component.
Thank you.
I do want to, so we've held this one separate because we have had some interest in this topic. I want to start off with, I got to do some clarification because I think there's some confusion around this topic. Child care centers in the land use code are prohibited in the Harmony Corridor. So in the Harmony Corridor zone, which is 1,000 feet north and south of Harmony Corridor from basically County Road 5 all the way to Latham Parkway, child care centers are not permitted currently. What staff is proposing that actually this seems like a good place to have child care centers. So we are in favor of having child care centers along the Harmony Corridor. So we think that is a necessary thing and is appropriate to be in the Harmony Corridor. There are very few other zoning areas, zoning districts in the town that allow for childcare that is so there's not a wide range of areas that they could be located. What is it, CC? Yeah, the CC zoning district and the NC zoning district, there are small areas of those scattered around the town currently and in the comprehensive plan. So they could be located elsewhere in town, but there's few and far between kind of a thing. So we do think this is a need, and we're very supportive of a daycare along Harmony Corridor. The challenge we're running into is it the most highest and best use and appropriate use directly fronting Harmony Road? And that's the most contentious component of this is that fronting component of the daycare right on the Harmony street frontage. We have another condition similar with car washes, where we prohibited them being directly on Harmony Corridor or on the Harmony frontage, but they're allowed in the Harmony Corridor. The car wash and a child care center are not equal in my mind, but they are similar in the fact that they would have not that frontage on Harmony Road. The reason why staff feels this way is that there are a couple of reasons. One is the need for the visibility in our mind is not as great as some other users might be. restaurant, retail, service, more in and out or visible users that need that visibility right on the corridor, feel that that's more important. It doesn't diminish the fact that childcares are important. So by placing them behind the front of the street frontage, they're still very close to the corridor. They are still probably mostly visible via signage and or the building location and orientation. The other reason is that there are children and safety components that along busy frontage. I know that there'll be fences and playgrounds and outdoor use areas will be safe and contained and separated from the frontage, but there is a perception there that you have a very busy road, and having children right in proximity to that is something that it just doesn't, from staff's perspective, isn't maybe the most appropriate thing. Architecturally, I think childcare centers can achieve architectural standards that the corridor demands. I think massing wise, it can meet the demands. And I think parking and landscaping wise, it can meet all those demands. So I think those things can be met. But from a staff perspective, it is maybe not the most appropriate. And that's why we're presenting it tonight as permitted with conditions, and the condition being that it doesn't directly front on Harmony Road. Just as an example, the project right next to us, just to the north of us, it's two buildings in a complex. There's a shopping center with multiple tenants, where Domino's, Backyard Bird, Little Gym, and I think there's one other in there. UC Health. They're directly on Harmony Road. There's a building that sits behind it where there's a dentist, doctor's office, real estate, the group, and used to be a gym. The two examples being the front building, the retail, more street fronting, needing that exposure, the back building potentially having the less exposure, but they're both very close and easily accessible from the corridor. So in fact, to get to both of those buildings, you have to drive off of Harmony Road, down Signal Tree, onto Timnath Trail Drive and into the parking lot. So the distance and the proximity is virtually the same from a traveling perspective. It's just the visibility perspective and the appropriateness in our minds. So I think that's all I have for that, and open to answer questions on it and give our other feedback.
Okay, I'm going to bring it up here first for questions from the commissioners, and then we will open up public comment. So who would like to go first? Tom.
So just to be clear, Matt, the primary reason you didn't want a daycare center fronting on Harmony is safety related issues, and you thought that there may be higher, better users, something more appropriate than a daycare center. Is that your primary reason?
Correct. That's our staff's position on this. Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to make sure that's clear.
Yep.
My personal opinion, we are more of a residential community, more of a village than a city here in Timnath, and I see no reason to prohibit or limit a daycare center along that street. It just doesn't make sense to me, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay. Anything else on commissioners? Robert?
Chairperson, I certainly have a number of thoughts, and I want to share them with the commission, but I would probably want to hear from the public comment before I express my feelings.
Okay, we can do it. Lisa, do you want to offer thoughts now?
Can you, what is the dimensions of the Harmony corridor, meaning how far south?
It's
and
1,000 feet north and
1,000
south
feet?
in any commercially or mixed use zoned lot. So even if a mixed use zone lot extends to say 1,200 feet, since it encompasses within that, it would still be considered Harmony Corridor, but it's essentially 1,000 feet north and south.
And that's roughly a
Roughly
fifth
to
of a
the,
mile.
yeah, that would be roughly to the next roundabout down here on Signal Tree.
Okay. And then what are the dimensions of some of these commercial type lots, or what would be how much space does a daycare need? So if you've got 1,000 feet, is it going to be a lot that is going to be roughly, 500 by 500, or, I mean,
So like the Neenan project to the north, right there was 3 acres from that standpoint. Not exactly sure on the exact depth, but it was probably about 400 feet long from north to south on that. Like Matt using that as an example, so like the south building from that could be the building that houses a daycare facility. Is it immediately on there? No, but it's, within 200 yards 200 yards of Harmony Road, and you still have the main visibility right as you turn off of Signal Tree, from that standpoint. So commercial lots typically vary. Like the commercial lots over in Costco and Walmart are about an acre in size. So it just really depends on how they're, parceled up by the developer at the time, to get to that final acreage and size.
What is
That
the-
size is about 200 by 200.
which one is?
Acre is about 200 by 200 feet.
Okay. So the daycare that's located down in Timnath Ranch that just went up, how big is that lot?
I'd have to go back and look. The building is 10,000 square feet. I believe that lot was in the range of 2 acres, an acre and a half to 2 acres at the end of the day.
A pretty large facility.
Yep.
Okay.
So going back to something you said, your example that Matt used. So for instance, what used to be Studio 68, could a daycare center, under what you're proposing, could a daycare center go in there?
Correct.
It could if they bought that or had
Correct.
started. from the
I
beginning.
mean, that whole building could, if it was still a core and shell, that whole building could turn into a daycare facility with what this proposal is. It's just if any of the vacancies, on that north building, that front, it would not be prohibited or it would not be permitted in that. But yes, under what we are proposing as staff, that, Studio 68 could turn into a daycare facility.
And likewise, on the other side where Raintree Animal Hospital is going to go, that's the first site plan approved on the north side. Are there lots of similar distance off Harmony Corridor from as is Studio 68 or that building? There are other lots up there as well. I'm just trying to get perspective here.
There can be. The way that the Timnath Landing fifth filing, which is what that is, currently is done, they are vertical lots that actually encompass from Harmony Road up to what is abutting the sixth filing right now. So the developer could come back and actually divide those lots to be, more horizontal, to where there is lots that do, split, one fronting and one not fronting. That could be a possibility over in Timnath Ranch, what was known as the fifth filing. There are lots that are, fronting Harmony, and then there's the road of Innovation Drive, and then lots that are behind that are still within the Harmony corridor. So there's other areas that are currently platted that have that, but none currently right now. They would just have to go through a subdivision process to potentially get to that.
Okay. And one of the things I was trying to get at is in using that, for instance, that Studio 68 room, or even the whole building, as you pointed out, to the extent that, as I believe we will hear in public comment, or at least somebody mentioned, an in and out component is a desirable component of a daycare, easy access to it, particularly if you're, for instance, you're driving down Harmony to the west. But in this case, for instance, the Studio 68 building is actually closer access from Harmony than is
Correct.
something that fronts on Harmony. And as I recall from the rain tree, the way it's configured, very similar circumstance. In other words, you're coming into it from well off of Harmony Road.
Correct.
Okay, which belies the issue of being able to access it right there.
Yep. So in some cases, the back lot would be the first lot that actually gets access to, especially with Harmony Road, with it being that major arterial and at some point 6 lanes. The access points are essentially defined right now for Harmony Road, and they're the main intersections. And then the rare case, some of the right in, right outs that Harmony or Timnath Landing was approved for. So there's not going to be any, immediate right in, right out to individual lots. It's going to be main intersections that will then feed to a connection street that then would provide access to lots. So you are correct. In some instances, the back lot would be the first one to get the access.
Okay, and then looking to the east off of Club Drive, where a daycare or something similar could go, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Turner's project, it'll be a very similar situation. You're not going to be accessing it directly. You're going to come in.
Correct.
From the
All of
backside.
those lots over there in what is known as the Timnath Ranch fifth filing, you have to turn on to Club, and then you have to turn on to what is known as Innovation Drive, which is a quick little cul-de-sac dead end, and that's how you get access to all of those lots from there.
Okay. Commissioners, I'm going to, particularly to Robert's point, unless you have questions at this point, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Now, I'm going to look to staff. I want to make a comment on something here that I think is pertinent. But staff, if I err in intent or my information, please don't hesitate to correct me. But I know from some of the comments we received, at least one or more are related to a specific request to approve a specific business, namely a daycare here, which, if I'm reading it correctly, has never passed through the procedure. It hasn't, in other words, it hasn't come to Planning Commission as a site plan. And technically, if I understand staff from this, and I may be putting one cart in before the horse in terms of another cart and horse, if that makes any sense. This is a request. So I would ask you, as you come up and deliver your public comment, to, if you can, separate the overarching issue about land use code amendments in a general sense from any assertion or any request about a specific business that right now cannot be approved in the Harmony Corridor, and in fact has not gone through the town's approval process. Is that, Kevin, is that
Correct.
said reasonably well?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So good. We're going to open up to public comment. We'll offer some leeway, but we are limiting it to 3 minutes each. Brian, if you want to use the timer, if not, you can just keep a general time on your.
Yeah, we'll use the timer. When the timer starts, it'll be a green light. When there's 30 seconds remaining in your 3 minutes, the light will go to yellow. And then when your 3 minutes are up, it'll go to red.
Okay. And do we have anybody anybody on Zoom?
We have 2 people on Zoom, and I have 5 people signed in here. So I think we're gonna do the in-person people first, if that's okay.
Okay. We'll do that. And we generally wanted to mention, generally, if all you're doing is affirming what the person or somebody before you has said, we're not going to deny you your 3 minutes, but appreciate it out of the deference to the late hour and the cold here in this room. If that's all you're doing, you're certainly welcome to get up and take your 3 minutes. But if all you're going to do is say you agree, but elaborate, just say I agree with that, if that's okay with you. All right. So let's open it up to public comment. As I mentioned, the gentleman, is that Mr. Barkley, that wanted to speak on 2 issues? John, you have 3 minutes on another issue and the daycare center issue.
And while John is coming up, I just want to mention to the people who are on Zoom, we'll call on you by name, and then you'll be able to unmute and then use your 3 minutes. And If you wouldn't mind just stating your name and address for the record.
Sure. John Barkley, 69 New Prior Road in Timnath. And my comment is on the issue of allowing or not allowing daycare centers to front Harmony Road. I think that there should be no restriction whether they front Harmony Road or not. Staff has already agreed that they're a good use and they're needed in the community. One of the things I want to point back, a little painful lesson from the past, and not to dredge too much bad things up, but the learning experience, the result of that was a lot of consternation among the residents, especially people who live along Tuxedo, and the issue they have lighted signs, you know, that they're looking across the street at. I don't think it was a good result and can't get into details on it here, but I think in this case, we have a great opportunity to put in a needed thing. The current need is now. And I think that's a great use of the property. And it really conveys a sense of family and community in this town of Timnath, much more than a car wash, you know, vet office, that's okay. We have one of those going up. You know, alcohol sales, that's allowed. But, you know, I think the daycare really helps the Timnath brand, if there's a better way to say that. What staff mentioned is the highest and best use on the restriction on Harmony Road. I have a couple of rebuttals to that. First is, I think visibility can be fixed with signage if it's thought out, and other businesses, if their daycare somehow blocks visibility from that, that might be able to be cured with some signs. And it's only one facility or one property on Harmony Road. So we're not looking at the whole thing being blocked out with a daycare. It's one little piece of the Harmony Road corridor. The other thing that recommended or staff discussed was safety, but I'm going to rebut that. Daycare centers are highly regulated in all states. I think we should let the regulation work the way it does. If it's allowed by the regulation, I think the town should be fine with that. And also mentioned was the issue of maybe using Studio 68, but that's just not a kid-friendly area. There's no room for a playground. A daycare should be, I think, something that looks more like an elementary school than an office building or a commercial building. And I thank you for the time and the opportunity to comment.
Okay, didn't you have a and I'm not forcing you, but I thought you had another issue on that you wanted to. Yeah, it's included in your 3 minutes. Go ahead. Give you a little leeway, but not much.
All right, sorry about that.
And by the way, there's no, I should have mentioned, it's been a while since there is no rebuttal on any of these. So don't count this as part of John's 3 minutes. There is no rebuttal on these. Once we hear all this, we will close public comment and we will not allow additional comments. So give him an additional little bit of time on his second issue here.
All right, thank you. One of the areas that I want to discuss is page 34 and 35 of the packet, and that's regarding liquor stores and facilities that serve alcohol. If you refer to that, you'll notice that there's asterisks under categories A and R1, 2, 3, 4, and residential mixed use, meaning simply not allowed. My concern is under the neighborhood commercial and community commercial, where potentially one of these facilities, a liquor store or someplace that serves alcohol, could be allowed. I don't think that that really fits in with our neighborhood and the whole theme of the residences in Timnath. I think things have changed over the years, and you know, a liquor store would be much better served up on Harmony Road, maybe not next door to the daycare center if you allow it, but it really should not be in these little pocket, you know, small parcels that are in neighborhoods. You know, for the people that live there, my concern is, you know, you have traffic at late hours, litter and trash, you have lights. Could be offensive to some people who have particular religions, may really not want to live next to a place that has alcohol involved with it. And it just doesn't give a sense of the family community that we all really like here in Timnath. And that so far is, you know, is done really well. Liquor store in my neighborhood, I'm not for it. And I thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, Brian.
Next is Nick Montebello. And I apologize. I think I did test it before the meeting and I had green lights, but I'm not seeing them right now. You didn't see lights when you were up there, John, did
Right
you?
here?
Right there, yeah.
Nothing lit up, no.
Okay, all
Okay.
right. So I'm gonna just give you the high sign when you got 30 seconds left.
All right, thanks. I won't take that long, I promise.
Did
It's
it have
cold
a
in
timer
here.
counting down on it? Nothing, okay.
My name is Nick Montalbano, Evening Commissioners. I'm here representing CAC
What,
Timnath.
your address, Nick?
Sorry, 1297 South Bryan Street, Denver, Colorado. So I'm representing CAC Timnath LLC, the developer for the Timnath Lake subdivision. I just wanted to kind of briefly come up and give a little more context as to how some of this discussion came about as far as the daycare center. Timnath Lakes, we have several commercial lots along Harmony Road, and we've been working with Woodmont, Kitty Academy, Woodmont and Kitty Academy to identify a place for them to build one of their academies, and they had begun having conversations with staff and appreciate staff's recommendation to allow this use in the Harmony corridor. And, we just wanted to have a conversation tonight, and I know they're open and willing to discuss ways to alleviate some of staff's concerns, and hope there can be some consideration to some different ways that might be able to alleviate those concerns. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next we have Grant Gary.
Good evening, Chairperson, members of the Commission. Grant Gary, 2100 West 7th Street, Fort Worth, Texas, 76107. Again, appreciate the time consideration this evening. As Nick alluded to, with the Woodmont Company, we are a commercial real estate developer, and we've historically been a retail developer since 1980. We've actually been a development partner with Kitty Academy, both in a real estate and development capacity for coming up in about 15 years now. So we have a very long-standing, deep relationship with the Kitty Academy organization. And we had actually just recently completed 2 other projects in the greater region, one in Lone Tree and another one here recently in Littleton. And as we were, engaging with Kitty Academy, I think it was evident very much at the time the need here in the community for quality educational childcare. And so that was how our involvement came to be in terms of the potential for this project. And just to add some further context, we've been working with Nick and Michael and the CAC Timnath team for quite some time now. In fact, we had actually looked at the Studio 68 facility at one point, and we had even looked at how could you lay that out? How could you lay out the playground? And you couldn't to meet the state requirements, because they are very stringent requirements. And so from that standpoint, where we are today, we are under contract. We're a contract vendee for a lot fronting Harmony. From a standpoint of, to your comment, we recognize here today, this is just about the land use, and we're very appreciative to Matt and Kevin and to staff for recognizing the need here today. And I think that's really the crux of where, our position is the need and the timing for the need. And so I think as we've evaluated opportunities here throughout the market for quite some time, really the takeaway was the opportunity that exists today is the lot that we currently are contracted for on Harmony Road. From that standpoint, as we were going through the process, evaluating the opportunity, evaluating the requirements of the Harmony corridor, we recognized that there was a need for there, to be a change in use in order to facilitate that development. So from that standpoint and going through our pre-app, we kind of came to a point of knowing that we needed to somewhat step back, reevaluate to then understand the path forward. So just as a practical matter, where we are today, we've completed our due diligence. So we've completed geotechnical investigation, we've completed surveys, we've completed phase 1. We've also completed a site plan and elevations, taking into account those requirements of the Harmony corridor. So from a standpoint, provided there is consideration to find a path forward to allow for this use within the Harmony corridor on Harmony, we are prepared to move forward in earnest under the proper channels in terms of going through Planning Commission and Council. So thank you all for your consideration here this evening.
Thank you. Who's next, Brian?
Devin Cohen.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you very much. Staff, thank you very much for the help you've been. I have a couple of prepared comments. Nanette and I, my wife Nanette, who will be the owners and running Kid Academy of Timnath. Nanette has submitted her comments in email, won't be talking tonight because we basically are going to say the same thing. There are several other people from Timnath that would have been here in support, but they tested positive for COVID, so they have submitted emails instead. In fact, we have 42 supportive comments that we received on social media when we posted in a 24-hour period. Nanette and I love this town. We have children, grandchildren growing up in Timnath. 74% of the population of Timnath are wage earners. The town is growing 20% year over year. The Early Childhood Council of Larimer County states 75% of the parents with infants in this county cannot find childcare. In our calls to the local childcare centers, there was a wait list out to 2023 for infant care. The Center for American Progress termed Timnath a childcare desert. Nobody disagrees with the need for additional childcare now to support the growth of the town. The only lot available within the next year or so is a lot we have contracted for on Harmony and Timnath Lakes. Any other lot north of Harmony will not be developed for 2 years and backs up to residential properties, which will likely upset contiguous homeowners. The planning department has told us it prefers a restaurant over a childcare facility on Harmony. Pre-COVID, it's a fact that 60% of restaurants fail in the first year and 80% fail within 3 years. This has got to be worse in a post-COVID environment, whereas 99.5% of the 300 kiddie academies has succeeded in spite of COVID. We have agreed upon a 20-year lease with the builder. The question we respectfully ask of the commission is which would provide more stability, a thriving anchor tenant like Kiddie Academy that will bring 150 families into Timnath Lakes twice a day, all ensuring the success of other retailers or restaurants that statistically would fail within the first 3 years for leaving a for lease sign on Harmony Road. Additionally, our Kiddie Academy will bring about 25 jobs into Timnath. We have committed to similar architecture the town has recently approved in the neighboring vet animal hospital and to a facade and landscape plan acceptable to the town. So to us, it comes down to this. Does the town want a business that meets the aesthetic and childcare needs of this young, vibrant, growing community within a year? Or is the town willing to delay meeting this need for years with the real possibility of contiguous future residential pushback? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Brian?
The last in person is Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnston, 3415 Box Hill Corporate Center Drive, Abington, Maryland. I'm with Kiddie Academy of Corporate. Members of the commission, Mr. Chairman, staff, thank you for your time today. And again, I got to reiterate the thanks to Matt and Kevin for bringing this to the front and their support of the child care's change in the code. Kiddie Academy Corporate is very pointed in their diligence on every lot that we select. This particular lot was brought to us by the team of Nanette and Devin, as well as Woodmont. And we don't take these things in a vacuum. Having the frontage is very, very desirable. We would be in support of removing that condition from the code amendment. Part of our concern is the accessibility visually and physically, as Commissioner Wood had mentioned about having the frontage on that road is very desirable in terms of the visuals, the visual access of traffic coming both east and west. We don't view our locations, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, I am trying to separate the land use code from the specific that we'll get into hopefully in a future meeting. I can only speak to what we do as a system though, and the visibility of the frontage is very desirable from that collection of traffic. We don't typically consider ourselves a destination. We are a pass by, whereas businesses will be, parents will be coming in to drop their children off on their way past a location. Having that frontage is paramount to that, that access to get them back on their way again. Conversely, having a number of other businesses located within that development, the presence of a child care will bring not one, but two separate trips per day into that community into that development, which will obviously help the adjacent businesses. From an aesthetic standpoint, we've made every attempt to make the elevations and the architectural features congruent with what the requirements are calling for. We believe that any solution we can come up with will be a very elegant solution and very community-based, as Commissioner Wood had mentioned as well. Being that this is a residential community feel versus a city feel. As Mr. Cohen had mentioned, these aren't one-off situations. This is a long-term situation in terms of a lease, 20-year lease. You won't have turnover, every 4 or 5 years, or every 3 years. 30 seconds. Thank you. And as Mr. Barkley had mentioned, we are very highly regulated in terms of the safety. We have zero concerns. Our academies have been on major corridors, commercial corridors in a number of different locations, which were provided to, I believe, to the town via the email. Having kids play on the street or on the street, but along the corridor will show signs of life. And we think that that's a very positive step as well for a growing community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brian, we have a couple Zoom.
I do have one person that just recently signed in.
Okay.
In person. It's RJ Martinez.
Thank you, Commissioners. RJ Martinez, 8240 White L, Windsor, Colorado. So just right next door. I'm here for several different reasons. Not only am I a father of a young family, but I'm actually potentially financing this project. I'm also a community banker in the area. I office in Greeley, but serve all of northern Colorado. My wife works in Fort Collins, so Timnath's actually a really good spot to drop off kids in between, spend some tax money at Costco and build some tax base there. As you get through this, I think it's important to warrant and look at a restaurant or a higher best use visibility of a project. As a banker or a financier, the way I'd be looking at it is, I don't like financing too many restaurants unless they're franchise based, and I do that as well as an SBA lender. So when I look at this project and everything that it's got, I believe it checks all the boxes for Timnath and what you guys are looking at. I know for me as a parent of a young family, checks the box for us. It's kind of in between for commuting families and the village and neighborhood feel that Timnath has. And I guess when I look at that, I'm also a fifth generation Coloradan. So I've kind of been all over the place, everywhere from Fort Collins, several years in Fort Collins, EU. So I've spent time in the corridor there and kind of everywhere in between, including the Eastern Plains where I grew up. So I look at this as an opportunity for you all to take this and, on behalf of your constituents, and use this as a valuable opportunity for you guys to provide this, again, separating everything it's not a gas station, it's not a car wash, it's something that's visible and desirable for the community to have a community feel. So I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Brian.
All right, we have 2 people on Zoom. I'm going to call on Gary Walter first. Gary, if you could unmute and then state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I actually do not have a comment on this at this time.
Thank you. The next one would be Melanie. If you could go ahead and unmute and say your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Bagley. I'm a development consultant working with the Woodmont Company. With all the powerful testimony that you've received tonight, I find it hard not to just, and considering the cold nature of the conditions and facility that you're in, just to bookend everything that has been stated tonight with, to plead to the commissioners to let us have the opportunity to work with staff to create a sense of place in this Timnath Lakes with the proposed childcare use fronting on Harmony Corridor. Since our pre-application meeting, we've gone back to the table as some of our other speakers have noted, and are working to bring the development and the site plan and the elevations up to snuff, so that it's something that this commission and that staff and that the town can be proud of. I think we have shown that we are willing to work with staff and with the town. And I think that shows good faith and what a good tenant and good service this will be for the town of Timnath. Again, I support everything that has been said tonight, and we look forward to working with you all on this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brian, anybody else?
Nothing further.
Okay, I'm bringing it back up here. Robert, I'll start with you since it was your idea to go ahead with that.
Thank you, Chairperson. And let me first start off by saying I have read all the comments that were submitted to the council. I appreciate very much all the comments that came here tonight. And, I really do appreciate the sense of community and people coming here and speaking and sharing their thoughts. I also want to commend staff in their recommendation here. It seems to me that this is a recognition of a need and trying to find a way to meet that need while still maintaining the Harmony Corridor. There is absolutely a need for childcare in our community. I don't think anyone would doubt that. And I would strongly encourage staff moving forward to continue to look for ways for us to expand opportunities to provide childcare here in our community. I also think that we need to remain cognizant that the Harmony Corridor and specifically lots that front Harmony are a limited and a valuable resource. And that when staff talks about the highest and the best use, that really is the gold standard. That is what they as planners, as employees of the city, are trained to look for. And really, that's an important thing. We need to realize that this is a valuable resource. I look at the staff's recommendation, and then I look just west of us across I-25 to the Everbrook Academy, which is a child care facility that is on Harmony but is recessed. I believe that sort of facility under this new proposal would be allowed. That facility does still have good visibility from Harmony, but does not take up one of those roadside spaces. I think it makes sense to look at that as an example of something that is successful and could be successful here. I know there's been a lot of comment about the Learning Academy in Timnath Ranch, and I know that that has caused some concern with the neighbors when that was being proposed and built. I think it's interesting that if we put an elementary school in a residential community, that is seen as a very positive thing generally. But when we utilize one of those lots to put in a daycare, a lot of concerns arise. And I just point out that that's an interesting dichotomy. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I can tell you that I live not too far from that facility, and I personally view it as a great benefit to that community. Unlike one of the major concerns about putting these in residential communities is traffic, but daycare tends to have a more staggered pattern where you don't see the starting bell, ending bell traffic rush and some of the traffic problems you see. So at least from my experience, having those in some of those residential commercial areas can be very successful. Speaking from personal experience, my children attend a daycare that does back up to a very busy commercial street. It's in Fort Collins, and if I had one complaint about that facility, it is the fact that it is on that busy corridor. I do personally have concerns about my children's safety. So I think that when staff brings that up as a concern, I believe it is a legitimate concern that ought to be considered. I can also tell you that my children come home telling me about the things that happen on that busy street, about the flashing lights, about the traffic accidents, and oftentimes they are exposed to things there that I wish they weren't. I am sympathetic to some of the folks that have come before us tonight to speak. I understand that there are contracts in play and things like that. But I think we need to step back and look at the bigger picture, the long-term future of our community, not necessarily the one specific immediate need of some of the people that have spoken here tonight. Not that I don't sympathize and appreciate where they've come from. I suppose I will just end by encouraging fellow commissioners to really appreciate the expertise of staff and appreciate the wisdom of, I think, what they've proposed here. And my recommendation to those voting tonight would be to adopt the staff's recommendations.
Other commissioners, I'm going to go last here and try and summarize a couple of things, plus maybe some new points. Who wants to? Anybody else? Christy?
So I've been sitting on this, mentally stewing it since we got the agenda last week. As a parent who's been paying for daycare for 14 years now, the safety was the first thing that came to my mind. And I agree 100%. There's a dearth of daycare in this community. I go all the way to Loveland to take my kids to daycare. It's also closer to where I work, but we've looked at various places closer, and we're picky. And had this facility, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I agree, like the safety facing Harmony worries me. And I know there's regulations. I know that you would take care of the kids as best as possible, but 3-year-olds dart, 2-year-olds dart. And then again, to repeat, Robert, like our staff does their job well, and we need to respect that and recognize that they know what they're talking about. And so, yeah, the safety is my biggest concern too for the kids.
Thanks, Christy. Tom?
I've got grandkids, 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, and they go to daycare when they're not at our house. There really isn't enough daycare locally, so having another daycare facility is a good thing. When we think about, best use along Harmony frontage, and then we have a UC Health, we have a backyard bird, we've got a new police station, we're going to have a new animal hospital, I guess, across the street. It's hard for me to believe that a daycare center is not equal to those kinds of things. I don't see a restaurant on the corner being better than a daycare center, frankly. I think having a daycare center that's very visible across the street from a police station and down the block from a fire station is almost the best place to put one. And the convenience of being able to get in and out off of Harmony is really a big plus. So personally, I don't see that this rule of not having a daycare center within 1,000 feet of Harmony, that doesn't make sense to me. And I think that there are ways to design and build and engineer a facility that will be safe and protective of even 2-year-olds that dart, and so does ours. So I don't see any reason to deny their request.
Thanks. Eric?
I've got a question for staff. We approve this amendment. to the code, which would allow daycares within the Harmony corridor. That doesn't stop this group from submitting a plan application to you guys for a fronting business, or does it? I want to separate the land use code adoption from the specific project. So I think by passing this land use code amendment, it adds to and gives more ability for more daycare centers in the Harmony corridor, correct? So we're not shutting anything out. If this group decides to move forward with their plan and submit an application to you, do they have the ability to request an amendment at that time, or does it get shut down of, no, it's not in the land use code? Again, I'm just trying to separate land use code from specific project here.
If it would be, if it's an application, that would be, if it's approved as staff has recommended, an application that comes in for it fronting Harmony Road would not be accepted because it is not a permitted use in that sense that it fronts Harmony Road.
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned, or you talk about the highest and best use for that area. When you look at what that is, has there been any other interest of other businesses to establish themselves along the Harmony corridor? And this would be displacing those?
We get interest all the time from businesses, nothing that actually, tends to formalize into much, but we do get interest quite a bit. The way staff looks at this is kind of the first domino, one of the first dominoes that falls, as we look at, the best and highest uses for the Harmony corridor. If, as Robert had mentioned, there's not much of the Harmony corridor that's available, since that's pretty much our primary thoroughfare. We only have 2 miles when you look at some of the others that, Fort Collins has, almost 10 miles of it, to where, we have to look at it as the long-term vision. And if this is one of the first dominoes that falls, then the next domino goes, the next domino goes, and then we're looking at a Harmony corridor that, potentially has, great uses like this, but not the highest and best for the fronting. And then we've precluded those highest and best uses that, may need that frontage, or that is a better, user for that. And then they don't want to come because there's nothing that's fronting Harmony Road that's left. And they have to go the 500-600 feet back off, kind of a thing. So that's the way, that's what staff's looking at it as, is, this is one of the first dominoes, for it. And we're looking at it from the long-term goal, not the immediate first need that's out there.
So in staff's opinion, what are the other types of businesses that have a higher and better use?
Like what was mentioned, restaurants, are there other retailers that are out there? More of the general services that's not just for Timnath, but the region as a whole, is what staff is looking at. Those commercial retailers that are going to provide more traffic, tax base, things like that, that need that fronting on Harmony is what we are looking at the highest and best uses.
So a retail establishment is going to create more economic impact than
Potentially,
something
depending
else.
on who it is.
And then you say this is the first domino to fall. What do you mean by that?
When I say first, one of the first dominoes to fall, it would be one of the first properties to develop, which then it continues to, the next property develops and the next one develops after that. So that's where we're looking at it, as this is one of the first things to start that chain reaction of developments. And we're looking at it as, if more of the primary fronting starts to develop out, are we losing the ability to get some of those retailers, restaurants, things like that, if other uses are fronting Harmony Road?
Okay. How did the animal hospital that is going in right on Harmony Corridor, that is not a restaurant, that is not a retail, that is not any of that. How did that qualify under that highest and best use?
At the time, that was what town council felt was an appropriate use for within the Harmony corridor. This Harmony corridor, as you might remember, went through both you as planning commission and town council years ago. There was a lot of input at that time, and that was what town council felt at the time was an appropriate highest and best use for within the Harmony corridor. I don't know if at the time town council kind of thought of it as a animal hospital fronting Harmony Road, which, could have been the case, could not have been the case. But a lot of this was determined years ago by, both you as Planning Commission and Council.
As far as the animal hospital or what the Harmony Corridor
Just what the
was?
Harmony, because the Harmony Corridor uses were set up during that time, which went through review of both.
And a veterinary hospital was considered acceptable in the Harmony Corridor at that time?
At that time, yes.
Is it still currently considered acceptable?
It still is, yep.
Okay.
And similarly, the childcare centers were prohibited. So there was a decision by this planning commission and the council to prohibit childcare centers along Harmony Corridor. So we're actually opening the door to allow it to come back in.
Why was it prohibited at that time? I was not
That
here.
was, it was prohibited.
It was prohibited because it is permitted in other zoning districts. So it was prohibited with Harmony Corridor.
We don't have any record of why it was prohibited.
It was part of the land use code adoption process. So.
Marty. Okay. First of all, I guess when I said I was hoping everybody could separate the general consideration from specific, I guess I would say I'm disappointed to a great extent that everybody we heard from tonight, and I realize we have a couple letters as well, but everybody here spoke who has a vested interest in a commercial endeavor for which they very much put the cart before the horse. And yeah, John, again, there's no debate, but I sense your body language. So perhaps you don't have a commercial interest in this. But with that exception, everybody else spoke who has a vested commercial interest in something for which they've not gone through the process. I thought what we were hearing tonight was a site plan. I know we weren't, but I felt like we were considering a site plan. So I am disappointed in the developer with whom the town, especially council, has bent over backwards through the various Timnath landings processes for many years. Disappointed that this got this far along to where essentially we heard a site plan proposal when this was something that was a prohibited use. I'm secondarily disappointed that it appears that from the comments tonight and from the letters we received that it appears that there's an assertion that we're opposed to childcare. And by no means is that the case. In fact, we're promoting it. So jumping ahead, I think staff has done a good job with this. In fact, they've been over backwards in finding a way to allow something along the Harmony Corridor with the provision that it not be directly facing on Harmony. The fact, furthermore, that the access to these is from some distance off the Harmony Road, using the Studio 68 building as an example, the building, not necessarily the room itself as an example, I think points to the fact that there seems to be a great deal of logic in having a daycare center somewhat off the frontage road. So with that said, I very much appreciate what Christy said. I appreciate what Robert said. Our staff has done a nice job here, and I find no reason to personally to deny them their recommendation to us that this be allowed, but it not be allowed fronting on Harmony Road. So, commissioners, did I miss anything here? Okay. Other questions, comments? All right. With that said, staff, anything else that I left out there?
I don't think so.
Okay. So with that, we need a motion. Oh, first of all, I guess we got to circle back. Tom, you were, before I cut you off, because we were talking
Sure.
about something else.
Chairperson,
You were about, yes.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
I do want to point out a point of clarification before Tom speaks about the roof material.
Yeah.
In the code, the section that we're actually modifying is the form section in that table. So that was something that we left when we were writing this up. We didn't clarify. It's the actual building form. So it's actually talking about the vertical faces of the building and not the roof. The roof has an entirely different section, and it has it talks about the roof design shall be appropriate to the architectural style of a building. Where exposed to public view, roof material shall be selected from enamel, standing seam metal, concrete or clay tiles, copper metal, or wood textured architectural grade or composition asphalt shingles. The use of plastic, fiberglass, or other metal or glass visible to the public view is prohibited. And that has it's in all in all zoning districts. So I think it might actually, with the combination of the change that we're recommending here in that section, we might get to your point about roof materials. So if you're talking the specific code section about the form and the siding, that's where the metal, we're excluding the metal. So I don't know if that helps clarify
That
this.
helps quite a bit, Matt. Thank you. I understand where you're trying to get with in terms of the siding and the concrete blocks or sheet metal. So I think we can go with that. I'm satisfied.
You're okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like yield to your judgment on that one. Okay, commissioners, everybody okay? Informally here with, if Tom's okay with that one. Now to the issue of the fuel station. Anybody want to suggest we, at a minimum, we are going to say at least a quarter mile, correct? As a recommendation to council, with the understanding that staff is going to do some further homework on this, if you will. Kevin, Kevin, you'll have a good idea how to phrase this.
Yeah, and I guess the question to you all is, do you want us to do research before it goes to council for approval, or are you going to be recommending that it gets just removed at council's approval and we come back in a future date as a part of a future amendment with this added in there?
I think I can speak to, was it Robert, were you the one that said maybe it would be better, or that Eric, the one better to go forward with something that doesn't require it to come back? I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, my suggestion is that we approve the quarter mile, but with a comment that we're recommending that staff provide additional information about surrounding municipalities and what they're doing, and that perhaps something greater than a quarter of a mile should at least be considered after that feedback. I also think we discussed the economic impact of gas stations compared to other uses, and maybe some research into that could be helpful.
Kevin, can you work with that? And Lisa, I'd be remiss in not, are you okay? Because this was, I agreed with you that, would you be comfortable with that approach? And Kevin, can you work with that?
I mean, Kevin, I'm not exactly sure that gets anybody what they need. It just says we approve it, and then.
That's why.
But we ask you to look at it. That doesn't put any teeth in that at all.
That's why I brought up the question of.
Sounds like we need to come back.
It's either we need a direction to have staff research and either come back with a further distance if that's what we come up with, or you all are comfortable with keeping at the quarter mile unless council wants to increase that, which they have the ability to as well. Because yeah, I get what you're saying, Lisa. If we look at it in other communities which may not have requirements or which wouldn't apply, or we're looking at Fort Collins, which they're at about 3/4 of a mile for some instances, we could end up back at the quarter of a mile decision at council.
Sounds like you'd be better coming back.
Is there a reason that this has to be done tonight? Can we say, look at this and bring something back next meeting and move quickly, but not, or do we need to have a recommendation this evening?
There's not anything that's really pressing on it right now. I would say, I think we're going to try and get into a mode of only doing land use code amendments about twice a year. So we would be potentially moving this into, a June, July timeline instead of having a one-off land use code amendment come back just 2 weeks later from that standpoint.
Well, I do think that you're a recommending body only, so you can make a recommendation that says you'd like to have this be revisited. The council could say, we want to just take it forward with the quarter mile, and they go forward with it. Or they could say, well, we agree with the planning commission, we'll send it back and have the planning commission revisit it. So I think those are your options really, is if you want to take something forward a quarter mile, if you're all comfortable with that, you can vote on it too. You can have folks that don't agree, or you can, because you don't have to have everybody on the same page with it. So I think you should probably make a motion with a condition to change, whether you send it back or you want to turn it down, or you want to actually make a motion that says you want to go greater distance and see if either one of those motions passes, and then vote on it based on that direction.
And I'm good with that. It comes down to whether you're trying to get them all passed under one motion with all of us. And
We can.
No, I'm by no means. I'd be very comfortable, especially, and that was an excellent question. And glad to hear Kevin say it's not something that has to be decided tonight. I'd be very comfortable pulling it or recommending to council that this was an item that we wanted staff to do a little bit further research on and come back through. Then it's council's discretion. They can accept that recommendation, but you've made some good points about it.
And I think Eric's point, you could recommend approval, at least the quarter mile, with a note for staff to do research to potentially come back with a future amendment to either increase it. That way there's at least something in place at this time. So if, for some reason within the next month, we do, for some reason get two gas stations that, come in across the street from each other, we have something in place. I think that's what more or less Robert was looking to do as well, is at least get the quarter mile approved now. So something's in place, and then with a direction to staff to look into other communities and then come back with a potential recommendation change at a future land use code amendment. I don't know if that works for you, Lisa.
yeah. Having something on the books is good, but with the condition that it be looked into and come back with a modified recommendation as needed.
I think it's really a more information asked for, where a quarter mile is far enough, not far enough, but you guys are the planners. And there's other people that have done this more efficiently than we have. So I'm all ears to hear what exists other places. I think it's good to get something on the books currently.
Yep.
And revisit it when we get some comparable information. So Lisa, you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay.
If you're good with that, I'm okay with that too. Kevin, you can work with that. Okay. On the daycare issue, is there anybody else that wants any similar consideration, any further notes going forward? We're going to make a motion. We're going to ask for a motion on all these land use code amendments. I'm just one voice on this, on what I said about my views of this. But is there anybody else that wants staff to add any concerns, conditions, whatever, to what goes forward as a recommendation? Matt, your suggestion.
So I think with the planning commissioners, if you are divided on this topic, somebody could make a motion as to removing the permitted with condition and see if that passes. So you're only voting on that one motion item. Then that gets added. If it passes, then we would make it conditional that we remove that from the land use code, and then you would act on the whole land use code amendment at one go. So I think the prudent thing to do is actually bring up this topic in particular, have a motion presented unless everybody's in agreement and they don't need to make that motion. But that's the best way to probably isolate that piece and then get it resolved in a formal way. And then you can do in mass the rest of it.
Okay, so as I understand it, I think I get it, but I'm going to restate it. You're suggesting that I ask if anybody wishes to make a motion to separate the daycare issue from
to amend the daycare recommendation from staff.
Amended from okay.
Yeah, it's not to separate it. It's to, if there's a motion to amend the current language that's in there.
And that's a way of getting to whether or not there's any difference of opinion.
Correct. If there's a motion to change and then that's voted on, and if there's no vote, then that motion essentially gets denied.
Okay.
And then it goes back to the whole where we're at with the proposed language.
Okay. If I misstate this,
yep, we'll help.
Cut me off at the pass here. Okay. Does anybody wish to make a motion to amend the staff recommendation on the daycare center?
Yes.
You do wish?
Yeah, and the motion would be to strike the condition and allow frontage.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to strike the condition that it would not be permitted. Go ahead.
And Chairperson, I think you should probably do a roll call vote on this so that we have everybody's point.
Okay, and do you
documented.
And ask, as we have in the past, for them to state their
this one isn't. This isn't.
This is pretty
This
clear.
is a land use code amendment, so you can have varying opinions. You don't have to make a statement as to why you feel yes or no.
It speaks for itself.
It speaks for itself. Yep.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and we have a second to strike staff's recommendation there. In other words, your motion and second, then I presume, is to permit daycare in the Harmony corridor where it is presently not permitted, but it is also permitted along the frontage road, along the frontage.
Correct.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second.
And I just want to make sure I understand, even though I'm not voting, a vote in favor here would allow a daycare both in the corridor and along the frontage.
I believe that's the motion and the second.
Yep,
Correct.
that is the motion. Second.
And that a vote against would still allow for the consideration of the question, basically the original staff recommendation of should it be allowed in the corridor but not fronting Harmony.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And Chairperson, since we have alternates, I'm only going to roll call the actual sitting planning commission members, and I'll do it in reverse order if that's okay.
Okay.
So you'll be last in this case.
Okay. A vote of yes is a vote in favor of the amendment
Correct.
Marty's motion. Correct.
of Marty's motion, seconded by Lisa.
Correct.
Okay. With that, may we have a roll call, please?
Okay, I'm going to start in the last. So Commissioner Christy Bickley,
No.
Commissioner Eric Westland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Bard,
Yes.
Chairperson Marty Jose,
Yes.
Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
No. Okay. So the motion carries to amend the recommendation to council as
Correct.
previously stated.
Yep. And now you make a motion on the land use code items as a whole with that condition to town council.
Okay. So with that, item 6B,
I don't want to complicate this or elongate it, but
Yep.
there's, I'm sure I'm the only one, but there's a couple things I take issue with the recommendation. Do we propose something now or what? Specifically what I'm talking about is like, that section, I think it was 4.4.13, saying that there's no speakers outside particular businesses. We have noise ordinances to take care of that thing. I don't think it belongs in there. And the other thing is there's a number of these that are restricting hours of operation. And I just think we're being too restrictive on businesses. And so I don't agree with those. Maybe as an alternative or a compromise for those is, maybe there's rules for new businesses abutting existing residences, and then maybe a different set for new businesses abutting potential non-existent residences, but even that gets a bit complex. I just want to go on record that we're being too restrictive, more restrictive than the towns around us, and I just frankly don't agree with it.
So at that point, I would say we would go through the same process. If there's ones that you want to have changed, we would go through the same process of another condition, or if you're fine with them and then having council vote on them, we would just do a motion to approve all, and then with your comments that you have concerns over it, that's more up to you on how you would want to, what you want to do there, Marty.
And we can do that. We can do it individually. You can group them together if you want, but we would do the same. What he's saying is we would go through the same. If you want to make a motion.
Yeah. So since I brought it up, I'll propose this, and you guys shoot me down if you don't agree. But with the hours of operation, I think it can be. I'm happy with just a general comment that goes from me to council that I oppose just the limitations on the hours as being too restrictive, based on the type of business and things like that. I think it would limit, like the healthcare, 6 a.m. is too late, 10 p.m. is too early. So I'm happy with just a general comment that would go to council on those. The 4.4.13, and again, I'm happy if you guys strike it down, but I would take the no speakers, no music. Basically we're asking people to whisper outside, which I don't agree with.
Okay.
So understand this was, correct me if I'm wrong again. This was only in areas adjoining residential.
No, the one Marty is specifically talking about is the distillery, wine or cidery and winery.
All places, all times, and I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, that one is what he's specifically talking about in that case.
Okay, so are either the first one clearly is that this is a little bit unusual, but simply mentioning that.
Yep, we've done this in the past.
That one commissioner wanted that
brought up
noted,
concern over that.
But it
Yep.
did not rise to the level of a motion to amend.
Yep, we've brought that. We've done that in the past where we've brought a commission concern, not a motion or a change, to then have council weigh in on that concern.
Do you want those all expressed as a concern, or do you want any of these, that or anything else to try to make a motion?
The hours of operation, unless somebody else wants to join that, it would just be a concern on the hours of operation.
Okay.
The 4.4.13, I think we should consider striking that. So I'd make a motion to strike that no music, anytime, any place, outside.
Yeah, I would support Marty, and I'd second that motion.
Sorry, Tom, we would need that from.
Hang on a second.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't have a motion yet.
I don't count.
Okay, could we, at the risk of prolonging this, staff, can we just ask you a few more thoughts on why this and what the basis of this was? because we didn't talk about it a whole lot. The basis, how does it compare to surrounding communities? Any thoughts that any additional thoughts that you have so that we can make an informed decision here on Marty's, what is, sounds like it's going to be a motion.
So with that being a predetermined condition,
Let me take it, Kevin. I'll take it. So we felt like so you have breweries, microbreweries, we have distilleries, wineries. They just are more of an industrial type of facility. And so the goal there was to try to keep the noise down to a degree and keep it more of a residentially friendly. I know it's not necessarily just adjacent to residential properties, but it does have a much higher propensity for noise and other things. So our goal was just to literally just try to limit the amount of volume, in those environments. And because it's allowed in places where it could be adjacent to or not to residential areas, it was just trying to curb some of those things initially. But we understand your position, and we understand that there is some compromise that could be reached where it could be allowed in certain circumstances.
Are you proposing just to strike the speakers portion? Because there is an hours of operation that goes with that as well.
There's that one bullet there that's, it's no speakers, no music.
But not the hours of operation.
Not the
necessarily.
hours of operation, just that one clause.
And I agree with you. If you've got reasonable hours of operation, which they do have, then outdoor speakers shouldn't be an issue.
And you have
in my
noise
opinion.
ordinances.
You do, exactly. So I support that.
With that said, then, are you okay? Do you want it expressed as a concern, or do you, is
no,
motion?
yeah, Marty made a motion, and I think Eric just seconded that motion.
Yeah, I will second it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, hang on. So your motion is to amend
Strike the language that's no music, no speakers, that bullet that's in that one.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's still subject to the noise ordinance.
Well, it's not subject to that. What I'm saying is we have noise ordinances that regulate that. So I think it's necessary in the land use code.
Okay. All right, so that's your motion okay, do it in a second, Tom? Did you?
No, Eric seconded it.
Huh?
Eric seconded it.
Eric seconded it. Okay, very good. Okay, so we need, we have a motion and a second. And do we need a roll call? Do you want a
we'll
roll
do it on
call
this
on
one.
this? Okay, so a vote yes is to amend the staff recommendation. A vote no. Okay.
So I'll actually do it reverse from that. Chairperson Phil Goldstein,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Barden,
Yes.
Commissioner Eric Westland,
Yes.
Commissioner Christina Bickley.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 5-0. All right, any other amendments to the recommendations, to the staff recommendations? Okay, with that, it will probably do a roll call vote on the overall.
We can do a roll call vote.
Okay,
on
let's do it.
It's the overall with the two conditions that we went through.
Okay, very good. So now need a motion on business item 6B, land use code amendment number 11. Yes.
Can you repeat it with your mic on?
Where are we at with the gas station? How did you interpret where we ended up on that?
How I interpreted where we ended up on that is we're making a recommendation. You guys are making a recommendation of the quarter mile with basically a concern condition that staff research other communities and their requirements for gas stations to then be brought back forward potentially at a future date for either increasing or keeping it the same.
Okay, thank you.
Is that correct or no?
That's fine.
Okay.
You all right? Okay. Okay. All right. So I actually have three. We have three amendments. That's not, that's not,
Technically
two, that's,
Two concerns.
Two
okay,
concerns. Yep,
okay, good.
yep, two. Oh, too many of them. Two, we've got two amendments and two concerns
Okay, that's,
to
All right.
pass along.
that'll work. Okay, all right, with that, I need a motion on item 6B, Land Use Code Amendment number 11. And we're gonna, I need a motion and a second
Well, it's a motion with the two amendments.
with the two
With the
amendments
two,
and the two
yeah,
concerns.
two
Okay,
conditions.
So motion to approve with two amendments, two concerns noted.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Christina Bickley,
Yes.
Commissioner Eric Westland,
Yes.
Commissioner Lisa Bard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marty Jost,
Yes.
Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
Yes. Very good. All right, thank you, staff. Thank you, commissioners. Reports. Commissioners, anything?
I have one thing, and I'll try to do it really quick. But this I know is probably early, but I don't think it's premature. But with the fires in Superior and Louisville, if it's not being done already or in the works, one of the things that I'd like to suggest is we take a very serious look at lessons learned from that. And, for example, when I watched the videos and I heard people talking about how the fire traveled through the neighborhoods, certainly the wind was the most significant factor. But one of the things I heard people talk about and that I saw in the videos was it traveled through the neighborhoods via the native areas, the open spaces and ditches. So, like I said, I wanted to, basically suggest we do a lessons learned there, because I saw some CSU material on this that they recommend for mitigation. You maintain grasses at no more than 6 inches. And I know a lot of our neighborhoods are far greater than that. And they either never mow them or maybe once a year. So just a suggestion to do that. And I did notice too that Windsor appears to be looking at that, both their town and fire officials as well. They've been down there and they're looking and things.
Can I add something? Thanks, Marty. Actually, that's a great point. We actually are starting to talk with our building official as well. A couple other problems that they have side yard setbacks of 5 feet. And so house to house is 10-foot separation in a lot of cases. The fire was actually moving from house to house very rapidly because the exterior of the home was on fire, and it would easily jump across that space. One of the things that town did long ago, not because of this, but we actually wanted to go to 7-foot side yards, meaning 14 feet. I don't know if that's enough, even more in that kind of a circumstance, but it might slow things a little bit more. So that actually is something we already have in our code built in. However, we allow it to move back to 5 for certain circumstances, open space corridors being one of them, which thereby is the vehicle and pathway by which the fire travels. So yes, I agree. It's we very much have our eyes open on this and need to look at ways to keep that at bay. So the potential. So thanks for the comment.
Commissioners, other questions, comments by way of a report? Okay. Staff, anything else?
I do want to make a note that meetings that are coming up are probably going to move to some sort of hybrid mode due to the rapid spread of COVID. We might be actually just having the planning commissioners and staff be in person and the rest of the public be via Zoom. Hopefully your comfort level with that. That's going to be a transition to immediate transition for town council in that regard for the next couple of meetings. Probably the planning commission will follow suit in that regard. But seeing how you have 7 versus they have 5, they have a little more space to separate. We need to consider our options on how to keep everybody safe. So just know that there may be some differences on how things are moving forward in terms of the arrangement with the public, at least, and the way that this this board does business.
Would the commissioners have the ability to join via Zoom if COVID was to?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would give that option for sure. Because we were doing that before when we first went into this mode of, well, when the first COVID outbreak started, we went into virtual mode and we were doing things that way then. So we have the capability of doing that. And so we might move into this kind of hybrid-ish kind of mode. So
Is this effective for council as of their meeting next week?
it is, yes.
Okay, so are you suggesting that this would be effective for us for our meeting 2 weeks hence, if in fact we have?
Correct. Yeah, we couldn't get out ahead of it on this one. This was just, we had people flying in and coming, you know, we were in that kind of odd space. So, yeah. So we just came about with the decision yesterday. So we're moving in this direction, or the conversation started yesterday. So we're moving in this direction.
Okay. Anything else?
I would just say that, I mean, that seems to be the direction that council wants to take. I think if this board wants to have a different, I think not less restrictive, but a more restrictive take on that, I think staff would be willing to talk to anybody about that.
Well, I would, for one, I like much more meeting in person. If there's some way to distance within this room or this building and still meet in person, that would be my personal opinion rather than going to full Zoom outside the building.
Okay.
Commissioners, what everybody else's thought?
In-person meetings, and I would give somebody leeway that if they weren't comfortable, they could join via Zoom per their own opinion or feelings or viewpoint would be my answer to that. I like the in-person meetings.
Okay.
Yep. So with that, when we do send out agendas, just please let us know at least the day before if you are planning on participating either in person or Zoom, so we can make the proper arrangements.
Okay. Anything else? Staff? Anybody? Commissioners? No. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all.